we're going to be looking at landscape archaeology part 6. And I do believe today we're going to be looking at documents part 2. And I'll mention a little bit about what we're going to be doing next week as well. So this is a 6-parter. I'll be saying a little bit more about documents as well. And I want to stress the importance of another area of documents which is usually missed, and newspaper reports. So we look at 2 areas of newspaper reports, and I stress the importance of old books as well, and some references to landscape archaeology and its interpretation associated with land trusted place. So we've got 6 bits I want to look at today. So let's start off with what Anne's interpretation is, and Pam's interpretation is go out and try and find some old documents. So this will be interesting because it's a very vague thing for me to ask. So do you know what? If anyone's going to make a fool of herself, it's going to be Anne. So Anne, what have you got for us today?
Well, I've got a will, a last will and testament of Michael William Balfe, who was, we thought he might have been our ancestor.
Can you stop a minute, because you deserve full screen. So here we go. And actually, that is brilliant, because that's, to be honest with you, Anne, you have impressed me, because a will is a wonderful document. And do you know what? That's what we're going to do. Go for it. I love it. Do it.
Well, the will is all written in italic, italic writing. We sent off for it to Somerset House. So it's not a big will.
How much of it you able to read?
Well, I've also got this, which is like a sort of a handwritten, well, it's actually his handwritten will.
Right, now, which one are you going to do, both or do one? Because
I think
do the one you can read. Do the one that you can actually read. Go for it.
Right, 5th day of November 1870, Michael William Balfe, formerly 15 North Audley Street, Oxford Street, in the county of Middlesex, but late of Rowney Abbey, Ware, in the county of Hertford. Professor of music, deceased, who died on the 20th day of October 1870 at Rowney Abbey, was proved in the principal registry of Her Majesty's Court of Probate by the oath of Lena Balfe of Rowney Abbey, aforesaid widow, the relief of the said deceased. And I was interested because, I'd never heard of Rowney Abbey. So that took me on a little search of Rowney Abbey. The actual, yeah, that's all like about he had asthma.
No. So we got 2. Actually, you're showing off now because you got 2 documents. This is why I wanted to do this. So wills are a massive source of evidence, and just again, we want to expand on this because this is the point. You get a document and you find another document and you move on and you explore the landscape. And obviously this is about history, archaeology, landscape archaeology. So, Anne, what I want you to do is quickly tell us what you can glean from the will, anything, because this is the whole point of documents. You get little bits. Tell us a bit more. Go for it.
Well, mainly he took over Rowney Abbey, and Rowney Abbey was in Hertfordshire, and it had been an 11th century priory. So I've got the OS map of today.
Yeah.
And then there's nothing there, you know, there's nothing there really. And then I looked for the I forgot what number it was. I think it's 1870, something like that. So
You can see it on there.
There's a lot more there, you know, and so that was interesting.
No, actually, no, that's really concise, Anne. And if you've got anything else to say it now, because that's a nice concise unit of information. What document you got now? Tell us. Don't just look.
This is the italic writing.
Right. And you said something about asthma. There's like condition that was in there.
Yeah, he had asthma, and he passed away.
So that's what killed him, yeah?
Have had pneumonia. I think he had pneumonia.
Got you.
And his wife was actually I found out lots of stuff about him because his wife was an opera singer, a Hungarian opera singer. So yeah, I mean you can, and his daughter is Louise Behrend, wife of Max Behrend, from the Kingdom of Prussia.
So do you know what? You've got loads of stuff there, and this is why documents are so interesting. What I'm going to do there, Anne, is that's a really good intro. That was quite concise. That's really good. So what I'm going to do now, I wasn't expecting that from you, Anne, so I was really impressed with that. So what I want now is I want to bring Pam your little bit now. So what I'm going to do, it's over to you, Pam. So speak, or forever hold your peace.
Okay, right. This is very small, but I looked at Pesticum Gardens and House. This is a little bit. After the death of Mrs. Portman in 1951, the house was headquarters of Somerset Fire Brigade for over 60 years, before in 2013 being acquired by the Pesticum Gardens Trust from Somerset County Council through the Community Assets Transfer Scheme. This is a little map to say where it is roughly.
So we can't see the map, but what are we looking at?
Right, what are you looking at?
Describe it. So basically, what type of document are we talking about for a start?
This is a Google map. So it gives you an account of where Pesticum House and Gardens is in relation to the Quantock House.
So basically, it's a document telling you about a house in what period of time?
Mrs. Portman died in 1951, and I'm sorry I haven't got a date for the house.
But is that, if the question is the house still there today?
Oh yeah, and it's well, you can visit in normal circumstances. It is definitely here.
Are the descriptions that you've got there different from what the house looks like today?
Yes, because
yes,
it has been. It used to be the actual gardens, temples, lakes, formal beds, joint work of great designers Gertrude Jekyll and Sir Edward Lutyens. It was let go when the fire brigade had it, so it was started to be renovated when Somerset County Council sold it to Pesticum Gardens Trust.
So this is the whole thing, histories of buildings and houses and how they change and what you're seeing. All these little links tie in with understanding the landscape, and this is really important when we think about documents. Anyway, thank you for that, Pam.
Okay.
Thanks for that.
I'll show you that one if you can see it.
So you've got, that's where it looks like today, that the green map, yeah? That's the estate.
It is the estate. It's on the grounds, to do it a bit of justice, an Edwardian Flemel garden, Georgian landscape garden, visitor reception, courtyard, Pesticum house, and a restaurant there.
Where
So
exactly?
renovated.
Where is Hescombe House again, quickly?
Right. It's George Taunton, Somerset, but on the Quantock Hills.
I knew you were talking about that landscape. Anyway, thanks for that, Pam.
Okay.
So what we're going to do now, again, contributions are really useful. Jess, do your point now. We've got a message through. I have a good chapter of the issue of documentation with archaeology by Professor Austin, as he was, the proper study medieval archaeology in the book From the Baltic to the Black Sea, Studies in Medieval Archaeology. So how big is this chapter, or just want to just do an overview quickly?
It's from page 9 to page 42.
Okay, we don't want to do it all.
No, I've written a summary up of it, and it was very much a lot of what you said in the first seminar of this series.
Yes.
How, you know, documents are important, but they can sometimes be conflicting. And from what I gathered of this chapter is archaeologists they're a little bit more better than historians, because not only do they understand the history and the documentation, they go further to a scientific aspect to sort of rule anything out and have a better understanding of the you know, the site. And this one was focused on medieval archaeology, so they was looking at you know, how they both don't have the same disciplinary, and David Austin just wanted them to sort of meet together and have a disciplinary, so there's not so much confusion. And at the time that this was written, archaeologists had not so much of a fear, but they weren't as confident, because you had documents and you know, historians dominating what had happened in these spaces. For example, Hound Tor, I've had a look at a lot of debate with that, and there's
can I introduce, we visited Hound Tor when we went to Cornwall, and it was a village which I've done a couple of videos on, and Jessica was there with us, and you know, we saw all the buildings, and I was describing them without any of this documentary stuff. Anyway, carry on, Jessica.
You have that narrative that you know, because I was talking about this in terms of this article, is that a lot of historians had just sort of pointed and said this is a medieval abandoned village. Don't know why it's abandoned, it's just abandoned. And some, you know, it sort of led to people to sort of not challenge that argument, and that's when archaeology sort of comes in and brings more of a story, I think, to these sites.
A bit of a narrative, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And in many ways, yeah, have you finished with that, Jessica? Because that was great. That was good. That was good. The one thing I keep saying in the lectures is that it's probably conflicting with what you just said. The one thing I say in lectures is that it's the archaeologist's job to present the evidence, and it's the historian's job to interpret it. But when you're trying to present archaeology, you've got to use all the information, and in many ways, lots of these things do conflict, but you've got to try and work together on everything that you're doing. So anyway, thanks for that, guys. So what we're going to do, I can't call you. Sorry. Go on.
We also come up with a solution when it comes to these sites to sort of help archaeologists. That, you know, from the time that chapter was written, obviously archaeologists have become more confident and sort of started challenging the narrative that we have. But we had this idea of sort of, instead of going there with assumptions, sort of go there with maybe a you know, looking for a question or a theme, and then sort of delving deeper into it.
Yeah, exactly. What are those strange circular buildings over there? Are they bee bowls or something? And you do the interpretation, and that's the thing. One thing about archaeology now is just there's so many questions, and you can't do everything. As me and Richard have learnt that. Richard, do you realise I've got a Tesco, a big Tesco carrier bag full of documents now for the Barry Carrickston book, which yeah. So there's a lot of stuff out there to do research with. So anyway, let's crack on. Thanks for all that, you two. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sort of introduce very much what we did last week, and there's this drawing in front of us. So documents and landscape archaeology. So the one thing I decided was that I didn't want to do any more involving documents after this week. I wanted to go into the scientific archaeology. So next week we're going to be looking at dating techniques. Now over the past many years I've mentioned the likes of radiocarbon dating and so on and so on. So that's what we're going to do next week. But let's look a little bit more of a stab at about documents. So you know, what we've got is we've got lots of accounts about earthworks, and we've looked at maps. All of these accounts and maps really help us to understand the landscape, but then we need to look a little bit more about historical documents. And what is a historical document? In fact, historical document, if you exclude maps from this, which we've already done, historical documents can be anything from a will. I've not set this up today. From a will to you know, descriptions of buildings as Pam did. Both of that was unexpected, and Jessica's very right in that you know, the archaeologists and historians are going to work together. It's historical documents help the archaeologist understand what those humps and bumps are, and those humps and bumps help the historians understand where those humps and bumps are in the first place. I'm going to make no attempt really at looking at all the different classes of documents and so on, and it's just that documents provide information. They provide information from what's there. In Time Team, I remember thinking about Time Team this morning. It'd be so wonderful to have Time Team back. And the reason why it would be wonderful to have Time Team back is because the archaeological programs that are out there now, like Digging for Britain and any descriptive stories about archaeological excavations, are, to be honest with you, quite boring. What Time Team used to do, they used to do the archaeological excavations, and somebody used to come in with the documents and say, that's what that is. And then you used to interpret the pottery and used to bring everything together. That's why Time Team was so great. But now with lots of these programs, it's just archaeologists explaining what they've got without the interpretation. Whether that's fair or not, that's probably what I feel, because I was a great fan of Time Team. Documents provide that information. They provide a sense of history of a site or an area. They give contemporary descriptions. Now, a will, in many ways, is a contemporary description of what's there. And lots of these documents suggest reasons for change. Pam mentioned something about change there. As with maps, maps document change. It is necessary to understand why any particular document was made and the reasons why it came to be written in the particular way that it was. So what we're saying there, as with maps, or as with anything, as with a diary, as with a will, it never ever covers everything. Archaeology never ever aims to interpret everything, and nor does history. It is common in landscape studies relating to medieval England, Wales, Scotland, to make use of the records of state taxation as sources of information about the density of population. So vis-a-vis, you've got a mill, which is recorded, and you've got a manor house, which is recorded. But unless people are paying taxes, you're not going to record who they are. So there's a bit of a bias there, but we've got some information. There's always some information from these historical documents. And when you think, going back to this about the density of population, to to make use of the records of state taxation as sources of information about density of population. But before this is actually done, one has to make sure of one's understanding of the basis of taxation in any particular year, because the way in which exemptions were arranged vary from time to time, and due to allowance will have to be made for this. So in other words, if you've got a window tax and you've got no windows in your house, then you're not going to be taxed, but there's still a building there. A hearth tax, you might not indicate, you might, you know, you got a house, but there's no hearth in it. It might be impossible, but that house is not going to be recorded. So one of the things I wanted to do is we've got this plan of Buckdean in Cambridgeshire in front of us, and what we're looking at is that we've got, if I can get my, and this is going to be a bit erroneous, but it sort of comes in with other things that we're going to be looking at tonight. So note the large enclosure to the north of the church. And all of this large thing about the large enclosure is sort of covered by a landscape description in 1647. So even though this map is towards way after when a description was made of the landscape in 1647, we know what's going on there in 1647 by a description and not necessarily a map. And what we've got is we've got the great Buckden Palace, which is actually marked there. And we've got this sort of great gatehouse. So all these things are sort of indicated. So one thing, describing landed property, one of the things in history is that landed property always seems to be described. When people have got property, they always want to describe it. It's one of the things, and we know more about the landscape of the landed property than any other classifications of people. It is not uncommon to come across documents which describe particular buildings or indeed whole estates, down to the last well. Landowners frequently found reasons to conduct surveys of their holdings. Well, I've got 2 gateways and it's written down, but you've only got 1 gateway. I've got 3 fish ponds, you've only got 1 fish pond, that type of thing. In history, in the history of our land, there were 2 particular periods when surveys were produced in enormous quantities. Some of the best records that we have in this country come from the time of the dissolution of the monasteries. So the monastic land was vast. 1/3 of the whole landscape of Britain was monastic land. And one of the reasons why the monasteries were dissolved in the 1530s, 1540s was because land needed to come back to the state rather than be kept by the church. So enormous detail was made of these monasteries and the dissolution, the hundreds of them. And then you've got written surveys were produced about their property within and who it was sold to and so on, who ended up with it, in other words. So you want to know, the king wants to know what land he's got to be able to distribute it, whether to people that were within the king's favor or he needed to sell them. And then the other period that we have large levels of documentary evidence. This is unseen. This is unseen of up until the point of the 1500s of Henry VIII and dissolution of monasteries and the defeat of Charles I at the time of the Civil War. Because those that had been on the king's side would have their land confiscated. And that confiscation would be landscapes that would then be sold to sort of bring into parliamentary coffers. And then what we do see with one example, we're going to quickly look at Llantrithid Place tonight, which is in Vale of Glamorgan. We see the subsequent sale and confiscation and so on of lots of land. That money, that land is divided and it goes to Parliament. And then when the king comes back, that land has to be given back to the people who owned it in the first place. And in many ways, that's a very difficult proposition. So what I'd like to do briefly is I'd like to give you a verbal description of a landscape, and a verbal description of a landscape is here. This is at Buckdean, as I said, in Cambridgeshire. And when the Parliament, because the people here, the owners here sided with the king, Parliament proposed to sell this property to basically, because, you know, you've been a bad boy, you'd been with the king, and now we own the landscape. So we don't really have maps, but what we've got in the 1647 survey, it describes a large hall of 65 feet by 37 feet, with 2 rows of stone pillars, partly covered with lead and partly with stone slates. So that nice bit of detail about the lead and the stone slates. There was a small cloister, a great chamber of 49 feet by 23 feet, nice descriptions, with a round high roof and something known as a wainscot chapel. And now a wainscot chapel is a chapel that's beautifully adorned with inside wooden panels. That's what a wainscot chapel is. So we've got a chapel there as well, 22 foot by 21 feet, and with chambers adjoining over it. A kitchen, a great brick tower, 4 stories high, called the King's Lodging, a gatehouse, and a moat. So all these things are described, but it's not there. It's not there now. Lots of this information that's described isn't there now. It also describes there was an outer court enclosed by a brick wall with an outer gateway, gardens, and a fish ponds. Well, we got the fish ponds there. We got the fish ponds. We know where that is. And we've also got a little park with 3 fish ponds encircled by a raised path and a double row of trees. And that's basically, this is what survives now in this upper area. Now, this description is great, but this description is great because in the 1800s, the hall that we've just described was removed. It's no longer with us. The various chambers and the chapel were removed. So the only record that we have is this verbal description from 1647, but we still got the fish ponds there. So, do you know, we're going to do another place that isn't on here, and I'm going to chuck in a few words here, and we're going to quickly look at Leicester Castle. So we're going to get rid of this a minute, right? We're going to quickly move to Leicester Castle, and one of you said last week, what the lecture last week was a little bit bitty. Well, it's going to be bitty because that's what documents are about. So a similar occurrence occurred in 1650 with Leicester Castle. And if this is the only description that we have of Leicester Castle, then so be it. So all that mesouage, that's a nice word for you to look at, mesouage, or tenement, commonly called the castle house, containing by estimation in length from north to south by 70 feet, and breadth from the east to west by 24 feet. Great descriptions of Castle House at Leicester Castle, and this is a comparative sale document. Again, people are reading this and thinking, well, you know, we've got a building that's 70 foot. Are we interested in buying it? Obviously, there was no photography back then. All that building of rugged stones, anciently called a kitchen, belonging unto the old castle, consisting of 4 squares of building, each square containing in length by estimation 36 foot. So again, a description of the kitchen. All that parcel of ground enclosed with an old wall of a rugged stone, lying on the north end of the said late castle, containing by estimation 1 acre. So good description. You've got a wall of rugged stones around it, and that's a parcel of land. It's describing that the parcel of ground called the moat, lying on the south side of the said castle, containing 1 acre. And so we've got another description of another area. And here we go. All that ruined vault parcel of the old castle arched over with freestone, containing by estimation length of 48 feet and in breadth 18 feet. So again, we've got these great descriptions of the castle. And here we go. And also the stone of an old piece of wall at the west end of the said vault. What exactly is that? It goes on to say there's also a garden plot associated with this as well. All that tenement erected on the last mentioned parcel of ground containing 28 feet length and 14 feet breadth, more or less, which tenement called the Southgate House and premises are in the occupation of William Freer. That's great. So they're selling this land, but there are tenants. And we've got the names of those tenants. Also within that land as well, there's another tenement of 36 feet from the north to the south by 18 feet from the east to west broad, now occupied by a certain John Palmer. We've also got a description of the stables. Stables being 60 foot in length by 16 foot in breadth. This is also occupied by a Daniel Abney, who's a gentleman.
Carl?
Yeah, go for it.
It says Llantrithid Place. Is that right?
Yeah, that's my next image, but that's not. We're looking at Leicester Castle at this minute.
Oh, right. Okay, it's because it's on the screen. That's all.
Not a problem. And then you get other descriptions, and this is where we lead into in a not yet, but in a few moments about Llantrithid Place. And then you get other descriptions that there was other buildings there, stables, outhouses, and so on. It's one of these things is to actually look at these old sale documents of these houses, because we can learn so much more about these old sale documents. So what I'd like to do next is I'd like to briefly look at a similar site that comes into this remit. Now, one of the things that we do find is I actually surveyed Llantrithid Place many, many years ago. And one great thing about Llantrithid Place is what actually remains there today. And if you go to Llantrithid Place today, if I want to actually, I've got too many people on the side of the screen. One thing, if I can actually show you this, right? Hang on a minute. I don't seem to have the map on the screen. Let's go to this. Hang on a minute. It's right. Here we go. I think it's this one. Excellent. Right. What are you seeing on your screen? Good. New share. Are you seeing a map on your screen now?
No.
No?
No.
Oh, shit.
Now I am. Now I am.
Right. Okay. Good. When we think about Llantrithid Place, I've extensively surveyed it, and it's quite an amazing site. And what we found over the years is what is remaining at Llantrithid Place is very different from the descriptions of the estate from the 1700s, for example. But you can probably make that out by looking at a rudimentary map. So this map itself is from 1898. So we sort of want to zoom in on this a little bit more. So there we go, we're zooming in. Excellent. Let's zoom in a little bit more. It's great to have these maps, and hopefully you've been looking at these, the website, for example, for these maps. And we've mentioned Leicester Castle, and you're thinking, well, why did I read that out? I just want to give you a description of how intense some of these historical descriptions are. Now, this is another type of description. This is a survey description. This isn't a sale description. This is a survey description. And this is of a site which would be familiar to some of us, Llantrithid Place. And this description is from 1788. Now, since 1788, if I can get this cursor on there, where's my little, where's my annotations? Right. What I'm going to do, I'm going to point out from the description what we're looking at. So if we want to move in that a little bit more, come out a little bit out the screen. Good. So this is, again, this is what you're seeing in 1898. So description from 1788. by Aubrey Bart's survey. And there's no map with it, there's just a description. So all you've got to go by is a description and a map. Archaeologists, historians working together. The premises at Llantrithid Place consist of a good mansion house. So all that we can see on the map today is the mansion house. So there's the mansion house, there it is. And that building there, and there was another building there, and the building to the rear. Good mansion house from 1788, stone built and tiled. On the ground floor, there is a vestibule, 2 parlours, butler's pantry, kitchen, scullery, servants' hall, laundry, and pantries with goods cellaring beneath. Now, if I can give you a verbal description of that, now the goods cellaring is completely hidden now. And the kitchen, the scullery, the servants' hall can probably be made out. The chamber on the first floor, which is now, all the floor for the first floor is now gone since 1788. The central wing, so if we want to move that there, the central wing is that wing there, commands a dining room with several good bed chambers. On the attic story, there are also bed chambers for the servants, and the rooms in the house are generally lofty and large. Now, that's the house. Now we can't really see. We can see the levels of the bed chambers, but the flooring for the bed chambers and the roof for the whole estate is now gone. To the southeast end, there are 2 kitchen gardens about 1 acre. So basically, where is the southeast? So it's going to be there, about 1 acre. There are 2 other gardens with a large greenhouse with stoves and a room oven for seeds of fruit. The gardens, so the gardens that it's actually describing are these ones here. These are the gardens that it's now describing. The gardens are walled, the walls still exist, and the walls pretty well covered with trees. In the garden, there is a canal, and the sides of which are walled. Well, I can help you with this. The canal is still there. That's the canal. In the orchard by the sides of the garden, there are 2 canals, the sides of which are walled. This is part planted with choice fruit trees. There are other fish ponds adjoining the premises from which the above canals are supplied with the water. So what you have other descriptions of canals, which I struggle to place. However, if you do look at the estate, it's very boggy, and that could give room to understand where those other canals are. It's simply changed over the years, but the canals are still going to be there hidden. So if we go a little bit further again, now on the map from 1898, it shows them outbuildings. 3 outbuildings. What are these outbuildings? I don't have the foggiest. But if you go with this description from 1788, we've got it here. The outbuildings consist of a dairy, 1, and a cheese chamber over a brew house, 2, wash house, malt house, and a cider mill house. Oh my God. So we don't actually have all them there, but there's lots of ruined buildings. 1 8-stall stable and 1 other stable for 6 horses with a granary, oven, and wagon house. Slaughterhouse, a dove house, and other necessary buildings. So hang on a minute. There's a fair few more buildings then that they're actually shown on the plan. But naturally, if you do go to this place, that you stumble over lots of bits and pieces. Now, one thing that's actually missing from this is something that our friend Sir Aubrey Bart was not aware of. And I'm just going to quickly tell you what this is. Hang on a minute. We don't want that. We want to move. Also, within the estate, and we're actually just off the map, actually, which is rather unfortunate. I thought we actually had it. Actually, within the estate, from another description, there's 3 buildings over here. And these are described as ice houses. And they're very interesting structures indeed. They're not on this description from 1788. So it's possible that Sir Aubrey Bart was not aware of those structures. So take this away now, and let's look at a few other images, right? And these descriptions, let's see if we can see anything more from this historical description. So what we're going to do, if we screen share again, and we go back to this. So now, this itself is the chamber on the first floor. And this is an impression by artist Mrs. J.M. Trahan as it stood in 1846. And hopefully Michelle will order one of Trahan's books from 1846 that shows this illustration. This is not Mary Trevelyan. And one thing I will say, there's 3 female writers and drafts individuals who are writing in the 1800s. They give us a great deal of information about the Vale of Glamorgan. And so the other one, whose name I mentioned the other day, is somebody by the name of Mary Ann Robertson Spencer. Anyway, so this itself goes very much into that description. So the chamber on the first floor wing commands a dining room with several good bed chambers. So this is great. So this is a chamber on the first floor, central wing, and this itself is a wonderful portrayal of what this was once thought to be like. Whether this ties in with the 1788 description is something else altogether. So if we want to, it says there is an indication that this is an impression from earlier work. The proportions are slightly exaggerated because, as you can see, the figures are slightly smaller. And what I would like to do is look at that. This is what Mary Trevelyan. So Mary Trevelyan's saying, right, this is what this looks like inside. Well, it obviously, it's slightly ruinous now in 1846. However, she's telling us that what this probably looked like at the beginning of the 1800s. So this is what this looked like to Trevelyan, Trevelyan, Trahan in 1846. And she shows a central, this central wing and a wing on the left and a wing on the right. Now, if you go there now, this sort of still stands, but the porch is gone. This more or less stands to full height, and this wing doesn't exist anymore. So these documents help us understand moments of sites, but these moments of sites, other than the descriptions, have almost disappeared for good. So what I'd like to do now is look at something else. And the something else talks about descriptions that are seemingly vague. So where you got Bart's survey from 1788, at the same time, there are antiquarians stroke historians that's work is sometimes dismissed. But then again, looking from an archaeological point of view, this writer is worth his weight in gold. And who are we talking about? We're talking about a man by the name of Iolo Morganwg. Hang on a minute. So Iolo Morganwg. So we'll keep this in the backdrop, actually. And this is the importance of looking at vague descriptions that are really, really helpful. So in the late 1700s, from the Iolo Morgannwg manuscripts, Edward Williams's manuscripts, he lived between 1747 and 1826. He owned a bookshop in Cowbridge. In his documents, he purports to have discovered the site of a large ancient bloomery. A bloomery is a smelting house for iron. And he describes this as near the Ely Bridge, that he describes as Lan Ely Bridge. At this site, sometime before Iolo's time, there were many finds reported to have been discovered in a layer of cinder and included pottery and coins. Most of these Roman finds were discovered in 1752 in the grounds of Lan Ely Hall, due west of the now found and well-known Roman villa, but the exact find spot has not been located. This site, if it is not part of the Ely Roman villa site, may be an iron smelting site, which had ready access to the iron ore mines. Iolo Morgannwg may have actually been describing the Roman villa at Ely, or he was describing another site that we haven't found yet. And why would he make this up in the first place? Most of the stuff written by Iolo Morgannwg is ignored. But Iolo Morgannwg also described another site outside Llantwit Major, and he described a field as a field called Gare Mead, Gare Mead, and he described the field as being the site of a Moor's castle or a Roman villa, and he describes human bones and an inscribed stone. Well, the inscribed stone disappeared. The site was said to have been discovered for the first time by John Story in 1886, but the site had actually, in fact, been found first by Iolo Morgannwg. So you must always, where there's a myth or a legend or some information in documents so described, you must always look at these documents and not take them with a pinch of salt and actually see if there's anything serious in these documents. So I've got some notes that I've been left people at this minute. So I'm just going to have a quick read of these. So let's look at the chat, see what people, I can't read the chat, people. Hang on a minute. Right. Whoever's left messages, can you tell me what they are? Because I can't read them. Oh yeah, I've got them now.
I think it was about.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, somebody saying, right, okay, yeah. Somebody saying why you've got an image. There's two of you on it. So, okay. So, right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop the screen sharing now. Excellent. Right. Speaker view, that's me. Are you just seeing me on the screen now?
Yeah.
You're just seeing me on the screen. Okay.
No, we're on here as well.
Good. So another thing I mentioned at the beginning tonight, I wanted to tell you about the seriousness of newspaper reports and how useful newspaper reports are. So I'm going to do this in two parts. Now, in researching the book, The Frolic Packet Steamer Disaster, March the 17th, 1831, that's Brian Ketcher's work. And me and Richard did a little bit of research on this as well. Sometimes the only references that we have to historical events are actually press cuttings, are actually newspaper reports. So in other words, if these newspaper reports hadn't been kept for posterity, we would have no knowledge of certain events. So again, March the 17th, 1831, This is a newspaper report from 1831. Dreadful shipwreck, loss of the Frolic steamer. We have the melancholy task this week of recording the loss of the above packet on her passage from Haverfordwest to this port, Bristol, on Wednesday night last, when every soul on board perished. The scene of this most distressing event was the Nash Sands, just off Nash Point, on the Glamorganshire coast, a short distance from Cowbridge. She was of large size, of 80 horsepower, commanded by Captain Jenkins, a lieutenant in the Royal Navy, and had a full competent crew, so that the accident must be ascribed to the dark, dirty, and tempestuous weather which blew at this time. Passengers from Milford, Tenby, and the surrounding country usually came by the Frolic, and we are sorry to say that she had a great number of passengers by this trip than usual. It is impossible to state accurately how many were on board, and there are very contradictory reports in circulation. We have subjoined a letter from a respectable individual residing at Haverfordwest, who rates the number as high as 80, including the crew. But we are glad to say that the Steam Packet Company, who ought to possess the best information, think that number to be overrated. Amongst those who have been ascertained to have perished, a General MacLeod and suit, and a compliment, in other words, his family and so on. Colonel Gordon, formerly of the Queen's Bays, and servant, Major and Mrs. Boyd and servants, Miss Richardson, Mrs. Boyd's niece, and Mr. Anderson of the dockyard, with his only son and daughter. The body of the captain was picked up on Friday and brought to this port on Saturday. 16 other bodies, including that of a woman with a child in her arms, and Miss Anderson, have been already washed ashore. The captain was found lashed to the rigging, and his watch had stopped at a few minutes before 4, about which time it is supposed the accident happened. From the circumstance of the captain being lashed to the rig, it has been thought that he must have existed some time after the vessel struck, but nautical men are of opinion that she must have gone over almost instantly after taking the sands. A very great cessation was felt in this city on the first announcement of the event, and numerous and anxious inquiries have been daily made on the arrival of the Welsh mail from the names of the unfortunate individuals who have perished. For from the circumstance of many persons going on board with various places who do not give their names, it is impossible to state either names or numbers accurately, as not one individual survives to tell the melancholy tale of the disaster. And interesting enough, it looks like we found one of the bodies of a certain Miss Richardson washed up on the shore in Barry. And if we didn't have those descriptions, we would know very little about the Frolic packet steamer, and we'd have very little that could have gone into this book. So press cuttings are very, very important sources of information. So we've looked at quite a number of sources today. So do you know what? Are you still just seeing me on the screen, because I can see everybody else? Good. So I'm just gonna check the time a minute. So
I can see everybody.
right, okay.
I can see everyone, but when Carl talks, I can just see Carl.
Okay, that's good. That's good enough. That's what I need. That's what I need. Okay, then carry on. Carry on, folks. You're the only one
talking.
I know I'm the only one talking, so that's good. So The other thing I'd like to mention as well, we've mentioned documents and so on, and I think another document should come into it is actually, we mentioned manuscripts of Iolo Morgannwg, and we mentioned newspaper cuttings and wills and descriptions. Thank you, Michelle. And it's actually sometimes useful. The only last surviving references to certain things are actually in books. So this book itself is from 1874. This is a book called The History of Glamorgan. And sometimes you can find wonderful things in these types of books. And one thing I've marked in here, if I can find it now, one thing I've marked in here is associated with old and extinct families of Glamorgan. And you look in the back of this book, page 125, the Gibbon family of Trecastle, the Evanses of Knoll, the Thomases of Dannegraig, and the Thomas family of Wenvo Castle. Now, this will interest somebody in particularly. So this is, again, an account from 1874. Thomas of Wenvo Castle, a family of Welsh origin and known by the name Thomas, lived on their inheritance at Wenvo in the latter part of the 1400s, when the heiress of Thomas ap Thomas married Evan Harpway of Tree Simon, descendant from an old family in Herefordshire, who thereupon assumed the surname Thomas and dwelt at Wenvo. So by rights, it should be the Harpway family of Wenvo, but the man decided to take, because of the inheritance, the name Thomas, and dwelt at Wenvo. His son Thomas married first a Basset, secondly a Khan, and his grandson John Thomas of Wenvo married Anne, a daughter of Rice Merrick of Cottrell. Now, Rice Merrick is great when you get descriptions of that, because Rice Merrick was the author of the Morgannwg Archaeology, Morganae Archaeographia. And interesting enough, I remember that name, Rice Merrick, because Rice Merrick writes an account of a ghost story at Tinkinswood Burial Chamber. So that's where I got that name. So when you read these old books and descriptions, so many things tie in. A later descendant, Edward Thomas of Wenvo Castle, was sheriff of Glamorgan in 1626. His grandson Edmund filed the same office in 1665, and his great-grandson, created a baronet in 1694, was sheriff in 1700. So much information. His title on his death in 1703 devolved upon his brother, Sir Edward Thomas, who married Mary of the Right Honourable John Howe of Stowell of Gloucester. His son, Sir Edmund Thomas of Wenvo Castle, MP for Wiltshire in 1759. Your head starts to go at this point. So he's of Wenvo Castle, and he was also MP for Wiltshire in 1759. Was succeeded in 1767 by his eldest son, Edmund, who died in 1789, having previously sold the Wenvo Castle estate to Peter Burt, Esquire, while a title descended to his brother, Sir John Thomas, who resided in England, whose representative of the present time is Sir George Thomas, 9th Baronet of Chingford, Essex, who bears the ancient arms of Thomas of Wenvo. So in other words, the ancient arms of Thomas of Wenvo, Richard, ended up at Chingford, Essex. And if you know, you get one thing about old books is you pick up weird things. I tell you what, you know, books are documents, and you know, when me and Richard have been doing research for the Barry and Cadoxton book, I said, well, have you come across this? And with all the research that Richard's done with documents, stuff that he couldn't find was actually in a published book from 1913. So with Richard's stuff and this stuff, it paints a wonderful picture, you know, it really, really does. So one thing I would like to mention lastly is basically looking at finally press cuttings. And you know what, we've and this is about St. Mary's Well Bay, Richard. So we've been asked to do research on St. Mary's Well Bay, and we couldn't find any information. So I said to Richard, go out there and find us some information on St. Mary's Well Bay. Tell us why it's called Bare Bum Bay. You know, all these different bits of research. Tell us about the you know, the sales of buildings and so on. So what I'd like to do is just get an image up in front of us, a mapped image. And if we can share a final image tonight. And if we want to go to sharing, are you seeing a map of St. Mary's Well Bay?
Yes.
Now this itself is from 1878. Now this will be of interest to a few of you tonight. And again, using newspaper cuttings as valuable bits of evidence. So what me and Richard were always being told that St. Mary's Well Bay was a major holiday resort. And the archaeology actually, the archaeology at St. Mary's Well Bay is all over the place. But what we do know, by 1907, this is a really important holiday resort. So what we've got, it's not shown on this map, but we've got what seems to be a promenade. We've got some other buildings over here. We've got some nice gardens. We've got some nice platforms. We've got, it's described as St. Mary's Well. There was once a well there. And then to, it's a bit of fun now, actually. This is an article from the Evening Telegraph, July the 7th, 1919. Seaside nymphs, Godiva-like apparitions on the beach. The discovery of two women bathing in a nude condition at Whitmore Bay, and the subsequent threat of the Barry Council to snapshot, this is Whitmore Bay at this minute, we'll get to St. Mary's Well Bay in a minute, snapshot the next offenders has surprised the public in other parts of the country. As a matter of fact, however, primitive conditions prevail in other parts of Wales. So here we go, St. Mary's Well Bay. At Lavernock, a sheltered bay just a few miles along the coast from Cardiff, mixed bathing is a recognised thing. And there are no vans. This is 1919. The ladies get over the difficulty by enveloping themselves in a raincoat or similar garment, and under cover of this, they wriggle into a bathing costume or vice versa. With the men, no such elaborate methods are resorted to. If the foot of the cliffs is occupied by family parties and the like, which is usual, the case they betake themselves to a spot down the beach among the seaweed to disrobe. The other day, I saw a party of four, 2 men and 2 maids, arrive on the beach. They separated a distance of about 300 yards and proceeded to undress, after which, with costumes on, of course, they raced down to the waves and become a merry party of 4 in the water. Afterwards, they returned to their respective dressing stations to make their toilet. In the more remote and less popular seaside resorts along the Welsh coast, the principle of the simple life is in regard to bathing by ladies is quite frequently observed. Staid married men on a holiday with their wives and families are often startled by Godiva-like apparitions when taking their walks along cliffs or shore. And I tell you what, that really paints a story associated with this bay. And also we got another press cut, and this is actually from July 1914 from the wonderful Western Mail. This is a letter written in. Dear Sir, I have had a little experience of continental bathing resorts and should like to support disgusted in his statement that such scenes witnessed at St. Mary's Well Bay would not be tolerated abroad. At the places I have visited, you see very little, if any, use made of the rocks for the protection of either sex, whilst undressing, both making use of the bathing machine provided for that purpose. And I may say that any man entering the water with merely slips on lays himself open to arrest. This is 1914. He must wear a proper bathing costume. As regards St. Mary's Well Bay, I fail to see that it is such a charming spot as one of your readers describes it. I consider Barry Island far more charming. I am not a shareholder of the company. And what a lovely stretch of sand as compared with the mud and stones of St. Mary's Well Bay, to say nothing of the broken bottles you see scattered about everywhere. Besides, proper bathing machines are provided for the public at the island. But I venture to say that if such was the case at St. Mary's Well Bay, only a small proportion of the fair sex would make use of them, preferring to undress in the open with difficulties. I firmly believe that the majority there are exceptions. Of the girls seen at St. Mary's Well Bay, do not go there for the purpose of sea bathe. And the greater the number of admirers, the more they are pleased. What is more natural? I wonder if they would go there to bathe if there were none of the sterner sex about. So in other words, people are bathing at that place, hence why it gets its name, Bare Bum Bay. And what I'd like to finally read out, I'd actually like to mention two things. You know, when we go to St. Mary's Well Bay, you get auctions. This is an auction of 1929. So if we move that as well, oh, hang on, move that there. There's a cottage there, and there's Ball Rock. So it doesn't take much to work out that's going to be Ball Cottage. So an auction on the 12th of June 1929, the sale of the leasehold of detached residence and grounds of Bull Cottage. Mr. Frank Llewellyn has been instructed to offer for sale by public auction at the Royal Hotel, Cardiff, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, the 12th of June, 1929, the delightful situated detached residence of Bull Cottage, St. Mary's Well Bay, Lavernock, without buildings, with vacant possession as follows: a sheltered and sunny position with a southerly aspect and giving charming views of the Bristol Channel, the Holmes and the Somerset coast. Somersetshire, that's what they used to call it back then. The property has a total area of 2 acres or thereabouts and is held on lease for 99 years from the 2nd of August 1912 at a ground rent of £40 per annum. The residence is situated on the main road from Lower Plath to Swanbridge, with easy distance of Cardiff. And it goes on to say, with a separate tradesman entrance, the pleasure grounds and gardens are attractively laid out and have a frontage of about 700 feet immediately bordering the St. Mary's Well Bay, and the situation is undoubtedly one of the most beautiful on the coast of Glamorgan. The accommodation includes 3 reception rooms, 4 bedrooms, billiard room, cloakroom with commodious domestic offices and outbuildings. Sanitation system is a private one to the seafront. Great, it just goes directly into the bay. Water supply is from the Cardiff Corporation Services. So if you would like particulars, go to Mr. Wild and Winston and Saple solicitors before the 12th of June 1929 to give your interest. I tell you what, some of the best stories come from press cuttings. And I'd just like to mention, probably done enough tonight actually, but in 1876, we've got an article about the Western Mail. I'm going to paraphrase this. In 1876, there's a dangerous firing from Lavernock Fort. And it describes about the Glamorgan artillery volunteers firing out at sea. And there happens at that time to be a pleasure boat there with 12 ladies and gentlemen on the open boat. And this Lavernock Fort opens up onto the boat, which nobody gets killed or anything. But one thing that's interesting about this, it tells you of the Lavernock Fort from 1876. Well, when you ever go to Lavernock Fort, you always think about a fort being there from the Second World War, not 1876. So I think that's fascinating that we've got that information there. So what I'd like to do now, I would like to stop the screen sharing, and I'd like to ask, are there any questionos? Go for it. Let's start off with Richard.
No, I'm fine. What you come out with?
What I come out with, good. Thank you very much. So remember, we'll do all the questions now. Next week we will be doing scientific archaeology. So that's next week. Ellen, what would you like? Anything you'd like to say now?
No, tonight was lovely. That was very interesting and nice. Sorry, I was late starting.
Oh, don't worry. I don't think you missed much.
If Bill is there, sorry, Bill, can I ask again the name again of the map publishers? Is Bill there?
Oh, the map. I tell you what, Bill, you find you tell her.
Charles and David, or David and Charles.
Cheers. I did look them up, but I put all my notes from last week somewhere, and there's such I don't know where anything is at the moment, so I've lost them. But yeah, thanks very much. It was a very good site. Excellent.
So they're still in business, are they? They must be.
I think there were two names of map publishers I was given, but I did look them up, and it's a very extensive. What they supply is wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. Right, let's crack on. What about you, Margaret? Okay, Margaret, we'll hear from Anne a minute. Oh, go for it.
I really enjoyed it tonight, Carl.
You did. To be honest with you, I was a bit perturbed last week. I thought you'd have got more out of last week than this week, but you got more out of this week. So
yeah, a lot more out of this week. Yeah. No,
that's good. But the thing is, I think one of the things I was trying to do last week with the mapping was more along the lines of different areas and their different areas and giving you a different bit of an overview. So no, it's fine. I'm glad you enjoyed it this week. So Bill, anything you'd like to say quick, babe?
Yes, indeed. Not quickly, though.
Oh, bloody hell.
One very important source of information, recording changes to the urban and rural landscape, are the minute books of district councils, or before 1894, the Board of Health. Okay. Now, 3 years back, I was asked to do a film presentation on the history of my street town hall, which currently is undergoing a £5 million refit.
Yeah.
And my source for that, which I found eventually, and I got it here, a copy of the actual minute book of the district council, all handwritten, all recorded minutes, dated, etc. Recorded not only the conditions and contract conditions governing the new town hall, which went up in 1881, but the difficulties of doing the work, contract disputes, but not only that, the wider context of changes to the landscape in the valley, new roads, existing roads to be modified, services to go in, etc., new bridges, new buildings, demolition of old buildings, new buildings going up, all that sort of thing. So that's a very important additional source of information. The minute book, Board of Health.
And then you can work out why certain buildings are gone at what period of time. Yeah, Bill, completely.
you can pinpoint the changes down to the exact date that the various councils and Board of Health actually agreed. So a marvelous source of information, the minute books.
And actually, Bill, what I'm going to say is that, you know, you feared what's going to happen with the archives from the History Society if it ever goes. If you can start thinking about us doing a complete record of every single document to put on the to put into the virtual museum, we could put your entire archive online, and we need to think about how we can do that.
As archivist of the society, Carl, that's done already. I've kept detailed records of everything we've got in the archives. It's a huge cabinet in the Recreation Centre Reference Library at the moment.
We'll have a chat about that.
If the time comes, when the time comes.
Exactly, that's good. Right, Anne, anything quickly?
Just that I have information about Rowney Abbey, very similar to what you've been talking about with respect of Llantrithid Place and you know, the different houses we've been through, and I'm looking forward to reading it.
Oh no, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go out and find some of the more of the stuff, you know. And to be honest with you, you know what I'm going to say. Give yourself a budget of 10 quid. Go on the internet and find a book from the 1800s anywhere in Wales and buy it. Just read the descriptions anywhere in Wales. An old book from the 1800s. Your budget is a tenner, and I tell you now, you can get some really old books on the internet for no budget at all. Pam, quickly.
Okay, you asked me a couple of questions.
Go for it.
I've just got the answers. Where is Pesticum House? It's Chedden Fitzpaine, Taunton.
Yeah.
Date of the house. It's grade 2 listed, originally 14th century, 1392, and stayed in the family for 400 years. The current house was built in the 16th century. Is it there today? Yes, and it's restored. That's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And then I think we've got Mena. I need to have a chat with you at the end anyway, but Jessica.
I thought it was really good. Thanks, Carl.
When am I going to do a bad lecture in your eyes?
Never.
Oh, right.
Rubbish. That's all you want to hear. College lecture rubbish. You'll be happy then.
No, that's
no, then, you know.
Do you know one thing? There's a guy in my class in Lansford Major. When I used to say, "Did you enjoy the lecture?" At the end of every lecture, used to say rubbish, and I picked it up on a recording once, right? And I put it on YouTube. And this person said, "Oh, that guy, you should chuck him out your classes. You know, this lecture was absolutely brilliant. You should get rid of him." And I basically thought, I'm not going to respond to this, but he always says it. And one day he said that the lecture was good. And I took him aside and I said, "The lecture wasn't that good, was it?" And he said, "No." So when he was saying it's rubbish, like every lecture is a good lecture, and it's just right. Okay, and Mena. But no. I tell you what, you do your one more thing. I'm just going to quickly ask if Mena's got anything to say. Mena, anything? No. You do your last thing now, and I'm going to give you all some homework, and then we'll call it a day. Margaret, last doodah.
A long time ago, I went to Chatsworth House, and there was some old recipe books there, and that was really interesting, looking through and seeing the massive amount of food that they had, you know, for every meal.
Do you know what? My parents bought these old recipe books from the 1850s, and you used to open them, and some of the recipes were so bizarre. And these were always recipes that had been copied from other books from 100 years earlier. And this is one thing. This is one thing that we're missing now. It's almost as if we've all got to write new stuff all the time, and based on really nothing. And then you go with the old books, and there's so much in them. And it's almost as if we discount lots of the old stuff. And as me and Richard have found that we might be trying to search endlessly for information, and all you need to do is pick up an old book, and you get a little reference for that little thing that we've been looking for the past 2 months. Isn't that right, Richard?
Yeah, it is.
So what I'm going to do for homework next week, right? I don't want to know about geophys next week. We're not doing geophys next week. I want to know about every scientific dating technique that you can actually find. I want you to all do an endless, you'll probably find up to about 10 scientific dating techniques that you can find. I want you to do an endless list, and probably we'll cover a few of them. So that's what we're going to do next week. Right, I'm back again, folks. Right, good.
Okay.
Are we all there? Thank God for that.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Right, so right, that's the first time that's happened, but I'm glad you all stayed on. If that happens, stay on. What was I saying?
We're going now.
Oh, I was just about to finish. Yeah, this is really frustrating. So, anyone got anything else to say? I needed to have a chat with Mena, and that's why I need to come back on. So
She's got a bad throat.
I have enjoyed this evening, and I by the sounds of it, you guys have as well. I will see you all in the week. I'll see you all next week. Get those dating techniques. That's what I was going to say. I'm going to try and make.
Oh, yeah.
Shut up. I'm going to make dating techniques really interesting next week, right? So instead of watching paint dry, I've got to make radiocarbon dating really, really sexy. So that's the great challenge. It's going to be done. So what I'm going to do, keep there, man. I'm going to say good night. Richard, I'll see you next week, Richard, Pam, Ellen, Anne, Jess, Bill, Mena, and Margaret. Thank you very much. Thanks for
Night,
I'll
all.
see you all.
Night, night, night.
Night, night, darlings. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Night, night. Night. Right. Whoa, we're still there, Margaret. What's that? Right, okay. Right, Mena. Right, good. Okay. Remove Bill. So we'll